them, didn't you? You know the one about the 65-page handout that you had? I'm going to go through the and tell Derek to give me my jump drive back when he's done with it. It's good shop practice to fill the brake fluid reservoir above the line marked max. Is that true or false?
False.
Okay. What happens if you do that?
You can break the seal.
No, you're not going to break the seal. Just put a little too much fluid in there, you know.
When too much fluid, wouldn't it spill over?
It can. You ever seen one of these things where somebody's driving down the road and there is a brake light on? When they first started up, the red brake light's on, and they go down the road a ways, and after the engine starts to warm up and everything, the red brake light goes off. Somebody tells you about that. My red brake light comes on for a little while, and then it goes off. And it does this every single day. In other words, I may drive 5-10 miles, and the first 2 or 3 miles I drive, I notice the red brake light's on, and then after about mile 3, it winks off. And so what's the first thing you're going to do with that? What you going to check? They don't feel anything wrong with their pedal or nothing like that. Huh? Yeah, because why? You're thinking, what's the reason?
It must be low on fluid.
A little bit low on fluid, and why would it go off when you're 3 miles down the road?
Heat expands.
It expands and it picks that little float up. Yeah, you would be surprised how common that is. Another time, you'll say, people say, my brake light comes on and stays on, and my blower don't work, and a lot of other accessories don't work for a while, and then all of a sudden I hear something go tink, and then they start working. Well, what happens on those cars, sometimes the ignition switch will hang just a little past and slightly in the start position, not spinning the starter still, but there's just past the on position. And some of the lights on the dash will prove out whenever you turn it to start. In other words, they'll come on, and that's the way you make sure they work. And brake light's one of them. Now, I say that as a qualifier because a lot of the vehicles that are newer, we'll see like an instrument cluster right there. Let me see an instrument cluster right there. Let me see it. Let me hold on to that. Now this right here, this instrument cluster here, is basically not, well, see where the wires plug in under the bottom? All right, this instrument cluster here is not a simple instrument cluster with magnetic gauges and stuff like that in it. This instrument cluster is actually a computer. And so a lot of the time when you got a computer for an instrument cluster, when you turn on the key, all of the gauges sweep and then go back. You ever seen them do that? Mm-hmm. You crank them out, they go. If you see one do that, then you basically have a computer in here that's talking to other computers in order to tell you where the gauges are supposed to go. So instrument clusters are not like they used to be. They're more complicated. Put that back over there. Some of the stuff that we do on that. Okay, I sort of got off to the left on that. When servicing brakes, you support the vehicle with a floor jack. You got to put a jack stand under it, or put it on the lift, basically. And when you raise one up on the lift, put all them pads under there where you think you're going to put them. There's actually, did you know there's manuals for that to tell you where to put them? There's actually got, but I don't know of anybody that uses those. Because if you're a guy that's lifted up a lot of vehicles, you can tell where it's supposed to go. But anyway, you're always supposed to put your your jack stand somewhere. Don't let the hydraulic jack support it. Even on the lift, if you do it right on the lift, you'll actually lower it onto the locks. That kind of thing. But a lot of times we don't do that. But the locks will catch it if it starts to come down anyway. It's the lifts that we got out here are all pretty safe. I had to replace one lift over there because. Oh, and here's something else. You know those little teeth that are on those swing arms that keep them from swinging? Those things, everybody that, I don't know who's doing this, I haven't seen them do it, but they want to pull those things up on some of these lifts and turn them so they won't lock. And that's really not wise because if they can shift around and cause the vehicle to fall off the lift, they're on there for safety. Basically, I've never had that happen in here except on one that didn't have those eons ago. There was a Ranger that tried to shift because the little locking thing was kind of wore out. And it enabled that lift. Somebody put it under there in such a way where that lift arm shifted. But those locks are supposed to keep those arms just locked in that whatever position they were in when it comes off the floor. And so if you pull that little thing up and turn it so that it's not locked, like I see on these lifts on this side of the shop, that's really sort of dangerous and you're not supposed to do it. But it seems like if I walk out there 4 times a week having fixed those things, somebody else has pulled them up and turned them again. And I don't know who's doing that, but you need to cut it out. You know, if you want to pull them up and turn them to set them and then pull them back so they lock back down in there, I can show you what I'm talking about. When we
I
get
haven't
out.
actually seen any of that would go back down though.
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
No, like the only time I've ever seen it really go back down, I guess, is when we start raising it up. It would just kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
But I mean, when we drop it down, that's the only time you can ever shift or remove.
Yeah,
it.
you can pull them up and turn them, and that's what seems like. I mean, it happens all the time in here, and they just leave them like that, and I feel like it'd be I-8, but that's there for safety. .5 brake fluid can damage the paint on vehicles.
True.
False. .5 brake fluid is silicone based. Now, .5 brake fluid is not anything you need to. I've told you this last time. It's not anything you're supposed to put in any modern brake system, particularly if it's got anti-lock brakes, because it'll whip up into a foam and you'll wind up with a bunch of air. You know, when those little isolation and valves in the anti-lock brake system are, you guys know what anti-lock brakes do? They basically are going to stop fluid from going to the wheel that's sliding, and they're basically going to isolate it so that it can't get any fluid until such a time as the wheel starts to roll again, and then it sort of machine guns it. And when those little pistons in that anti-lock brake unit are hammering really fast, they can whip that .5 fluid up into a foam and makes air in the system that didn't have air in it, you see. And it's just really not good to put .5 brake fluid in anything anymore, unless you're working on a 64 Volkswagen bus or something and you want something that's going to make the rubber last longer in there. Hydraulic pressure can be lost if brake fluid evaporates.
False.
Well, that's actually true. If it evaporates enough where it gets low enough, yeah, you're going to lose some hydraulic pressure if it gets low enough to where it's letting air in there. If you obtain medium weight fluid, mix .3 and .5. No, you don't ever mix brake fluid. That's ridiculous. That's number 5. Do not mix brake fluid. Because .5 brake fluid is polyglycol based product, it's less likely to absorb moisture. Well, that's not true. Brake fluid is hygroscopic anyway. It likes to absorb moisture. Brake fluid is a moisture absorbing thing. And let me tell you this, when you're pouring brake fluid, don't leave the cap off the brake fluid bottle. If you leave the cap off, it's going to soak up moisture, and that's going to change the boiling point and the properties of the fluid, and you really want to keep it. When you ain't pouring it, put the cap back on it. See, I mean, it's beyond the pale to think you might never get any moisture in that jug at all from the air. But if you just let it sit there and leave it wide open, you're asking for trouble. Basically, you got your brake test 1 there. You got
You had a new sheet set. You also got a new number, shelf number.
8. Did you still not get brakes test 1? Wow. I had actually put those things in there this morning.
Who's 7? Who's Rogers?
Rogers is him. He may have yours.
Good.
That's okay, Rogers. You keep yours, and then they swap to you. Yeah. Make sure you look at your numbers. Probably didn't. Rogers, you see your number up there is 7. Up there. Look at those papers. That may have been what happened on that. It kind of confuses people. And you got some, didn't you? Okay. All right. Let's make sure that we're going here. Brake pedal fade can occur when a brake fluid boils.
True.
It can. And I'll tell you something else too. We talked about that before. When you mash the brake, your car stops and you're holding your foot on the brake, and then you feel the pedal. Initially it feels good. Then you're sitting here at a stop sign, all of a sudden you notice your brake pedal's just easing onto the floor. You ever felt that before? That's a bad master cylinder. That's what it is. And when you feel that, your master cylinder needs to be replaced. This is a part out here where you're going to pour your fluid in. Not that hard to replace that. There is a bench bleed procedure where you're supposed to, push the air out of that thing before you change it. That way you ain't got to bleed all the brakes. Real smart. There's a worksheet on that. When you take a master cylinder, pour fluid in it, and you work it with a screwdriver, and you work all the air out of it before you put it on the car. You can do it on the vehicle. You can actually bolt it up before you put your brake lights on there. Hold your thumbs over those lines and have somebody gently work the pedal until all the air is gone. The new master cylinders will basically come with little lines, little plastic lines you can loop over and go back into the reservoir and stick them in there where the brake fluid comes out. And you keep working it, and there are little clear lines, and you can see when all the air is gone out of there. The downside about not bench bleeding the master cylinder is you got to bleed all the daggum brakes. And if you're like me, you don't want to do that if you ain't got to. You got to be lazy enough to where you do the job right, so you don't got to do a bunch of extra work. I'm not going to go looking for extra work to do by just putting an empty master cylinder on there and pumping the system full of air so I can spend another half an hour bleeding the doggone thing. Okay, one of the things I used to do when I first started teaching brakes in here is I'd take that little Ford Ranger and I'd pull the wheel cylinders off. I mean, excuse me, the calipers, brake calipers, and I'd put them on the wrong sides of the truck. They'd fit on either side, and I'd put them, just swap them around, and then I'd get all the fluid out of them. I'd say, okay, fill that thing up, and bleed it out. And they'd work for 3 or 4 hours trying to bleed it out, never could bleed it out. You know why? Because when you move them to the opposite side of the truck, the bleeder is on the bottom instead of the top, and the air ain't never coming out of there because it's above the bleeder. So you always got to make sure that bleeder is on the top part of that caliper. You know, see where I'm talking about?
Unless you vacuum it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That would. I don't. That won't even usually work if the air is above the bleeder. You know. Okay. But all right. Parking brakes are an example of static friction at work. Yeah, that's true. Static friction. Nothing going on. Static means nothing's moving. Dynamic is whenever it's happening, when things are going on, right? And you know, when your parking brakes are engaged, there's nothing moving, and the parking brakes are keeping things from moving. How many of you have ever seen a big truck that's got a brake drum on the drive shaft, back of the transmission? Big brake drum right there on the drive shaft, and the park brakes go into that. It basically keeps the drive shaft from turning. You ever seen that? Probably in that military stuff. Well, if you pull the drive shaft off, you got no park brake that way. You can pull a park brake or drive shaft's not there to keep it from turning. The truck can roll away. See, that's really something they do on heavy trucks and stuff. Not tractor trailers, but the medium duty stuff. You know, disc brake pads clamp against a rotating brake drum.
True.
False. Not a drum. A disc. A disc.
I'm messing this all up.
Yeah. Yeah. Electronics will play an important role in future braking systems.
They already do.
They already do. You're absolutely right. Yeah, well, that question could be qualified as yes anyway. Because of nature of things.
Oh, I'm saying.
Now, whenever you mash the brakes. All right, now you look at the back side on that. Flip it over. Got more questions on the back. Got it? All right, we ain't done yet. Friction can be increased by A, making surfaces in contact smoother, B, using a lubricant, C, wetting the surfaces, or D, increasing the load. Increasing the load, that's right. Okay, number 12, newer dual braking systems. That's going to be, they say they use one hydraulic system to control the 2 left wheels and another to control the 2 right. B, use one hydraulic system to control the right front and left rear, and another to control the left front and right rear. And that's the right answer for that one. B is. That's that. We saw that on the, that little PowerPoint thing or sort of presentation I did last week. Why should you not use compressed air to clean dust from brakes?
Asbestos.
Huh?
Asbestos.
Yes, mesothelioma is no fun. Well, I'll tell you something that I came in here one day, and this just totally blows me away how this thing works. One of the very first semesters I ever taught, I taught brakes. I think it was the very first semester I taught brakes. This was the same stuff I'm teaching now. And I told everybody in here, I says, do not ever take a brake drum off and use air to blow the dust off the brake drum, because that makes that stuff airborne. It goes everywhere, and people breathe it and all that. It's bad, That's like about a zillion little saw blades going into your lungs. It's like smoking 10,000 packs of cigarettes, and it's not near as much fun. I mean, it's really bad for your lungs. It really is. Well, we got out there. Car goes up on the lift. The very first thing one of those guys did was blow all that dust off of there. Very first thing he did. I don't get it. When you're cleaning a brake dust off, or even in a clutch, like you're going to be putting a clutch in, Sean, you and somebody else that I hadn't decided who to put with you yet. But I got a job for you too. And if I won't have you and Abby pull the transmission out of a red car, you're going to do that. But anyway, be careful with that on your clutch too, because your clutch has got asbestos stuff in there, and you want to make sure that you don't breathe that stuff. There's more on brakes than there is on a clutch, typically, because the clutch kind of gets rid of it, but it gets trapped in that brake drum, and that's just real important. Something else that brake dust will do in the drum is make it squeal. If the rear brakes are squealing, a lot of times you can. So how do you clean the brake dust out?
Brake cleaner?
With water, yeah. I mean, anything that you can use. I mean, if you sprayed the thing with 409 and wash it with a water hose, you're better off than using anything dry. Or brake parts cleaner works. Just make sure you just wet it really good, because wet dust can't fly. Now, we had one of these brake washing things from Safety Clean, but we only use it like 1 or 2 terms a year. And they were wanting to put new chemical in it about every 6 or 8 weeks, and it was costing me like $300 every time they did that. if we did brakes all year round, I'd say, yeah, that's fine. But I got sick of paying them $300 because a lot of times the chemical they were taking was clean and they never had any, so we can actually do without that as long as we make sure that we wash the brake dust off with something wet. Okay, that's what we're needing to do there.
If you got rags that are contaminated with asbestos from wet cleaning them, what are you supposed to do with the rags?
Well, the rags, as long as there's not any dust flying around, I tell you what, the the rag man will usually throw them away if he knows that's asbestos on them.
You can throw them away.
Throw them in the trash, Just put them in there, but make sure that you don't breathe the dust,
I thought you weren't supposed to throw that away.
Yeah. Well, what you gonna do? Keep it forever or something like that?
Can't really burn it, can
I
you?
mean, I thought that was just a more practical operating procedure.
Not really. That stuff is it's there. You just gotta, if you can protect it so somebody doesn't breathe it, that's what you're supposed to do. And I don't know what the regulation is on that. I don't think there's anybody that's written any regulation on rags that have asbestos dust embedded. Probably nobody's thought of that, and let's hope they don't, because they may make us start doing stuff we don't have the resources to do. So you don't want to blow that dust into the air. Well, finally, 14. Parking brakes are usually what?
Located on the rear wheel.
Yeah, usually located on the rear wheel. And like I say, the big trucks, like I was talking about, they have that one big brake drum around the drive shaft. That's different. Brake fluid must not do what? Brake fluid must not be what?
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you what brake fluid will do is it will absorb moisture. But in every way that you can, you need to prevent it. That's the point. You don't want brake fluid that has absorbed moisture.
I thought brake fluid was supposed to absorb moisture, though, because if it gets in your system somehow, it would be better if it absorbed it than if it was a bilayer fluid.
It will, but like I say, it's also...
You do want to avoid that, don't you? Because,
Yeah, but if it
raises
gets-
the boiling point.
Yeah, it
so
changes the boiling
it'll burn the
point.
But
crap
if
out
it
of your
does
brake.
get in there, it would be better for it to be absorbed into it than it would be to have like a bilayer fluid like oil and water or something, right?
There was this old man, that I knew one time that blew a brake line somewhere on his car out there when he was traveling with his family somewhere. And this was a salty old guy. He was a welder, and he could tinker with stuff, usually figure out what was wrong with it and fix it. And he said that he got his, something happened and the brake fluid all got gone out of the car. And he was way out in the middle of nowhere. And he says, well, we got to have brakes to get home. And in those days, you didn't just call a wrecker. And so, and I don't even know what happened, but every last little bit of the brake fluid was gone out of his system. And so he just filled that sucker up with water and bled it. Yeah, well, just what he had to do. You know what I'm saying? To improvise, overcome, this kind of thing, and the marine stuff. And so he drove that thing back home, and he said, I figured it would have rusted everything up in there, but he says, I pushed all that stuff out of there and put brake fluid in there, and it was just fine. Well, he got by with it, that's what I'm getting at. And but I'm saying, you can't just put water in there. I know I read somewhere that in Siberia they use vodka or something, because it won't freeze, But anyway. Huh?
My buddy froze in a bottle of vodka.
Yeah.
Is it better to use galvanized tubing for
Huh?
brake lining?